You're just wasting your life, my mother-in-law sneered, swirling her wine glass as she glanced around our modest home. A woman with a degree, choosing to play house? You're lucky my son makes enough to afford this little arrangement, Patricia scoffed as she picked at her salad. Not every woman gets to lounge around all day while their husband works. My fingers dug into my coffee mug, the ceramic handle pressing into my palm hard enough to leave an imprint. My heart pounded in my chest, more from the sheer audacity of her comment than from any real surprise. This was how she always spoke to me. Like my time and my life choices held no value. I darted a look at my husband David, but as usual, he gave me that tight-lipped, apologetic smile and kept his head lowered, refusing to engage. Patricia's words dripped with condescension, and I fought the urge to snap back, to list off all the ways I contributed to our household. Emotionally, physically, and unbeknownst to her, financially. 1,000 quiet retorts simmered in my mind, but I stayed silent. After all, I was about to prove her wrong in a way she'd never see coming. Little did she know, I was making more money in a month than she and her high-powered social circle made in a year. Every time Patricia visited, she made sure to remind me of what she believed to be my inferior status in the household. In her eyes, a woman of intelligence and capability should be out conquering the corporate world, or at least putting her degree to use in a 9-to-5. The fact that I chose to stay home and focus on our children was, to her, the ultimate waste of potential. David, being mild-mannered and eternally conflict-averse, rarely challenged his mother. He would hold my hand under the table or give me a quick side hug afterward, whispering that I shouldn't let her remarks get to me. But of course they did. Sometimes, late at night when I couldn't sleep, I would stare at the ceiling, replaying Patricia's words in my head and wondering if I was somehow lacking. Yet with every condescending comment, my determination to succeed on my own terms only grew stronger. There was an energy that crackled inside me, fueled by her doubt. And while she saw me as an idle housewife, the truth was that I was running a rapidly flourishing online enterprise, from the very same home she dismissed as my little playground. Patricia's scorn traced back to the day David and I announced our engagement. She'd plastered on a wide smile, but I caught the slight twitch in her left eye, the tightening of her jaw. In the early days, I chalked it up to the typical tension between a mother and her son's fiancé. But soon, her subtle jabs turned into outright critique. She would point out, quite loudly, that I had a promising career path after college. You studied communications. Why don't you use your degree? That was her constant refrain. Over time, the question evolved into the more pointed, more acidic, "So, when will you get a real job?" During our first big family holiday together, I remember her lecturing me about how women today are missing out if they rely on a man's paycheck. The double standard stung. She was the type of person who believed that success was measured by an office, a title, and a steady paycheck from a recognized institution. My staying home to care for our new baby was, in her mind, a direct affront to modern womanhood. But deep down, her disapproval only made me cling more fiercely to my instincts and my choice. The friction grew stronger each passing year. Patricia never wasted an opportunity to belittle my role as a stay-at-home mom. She'd make jokes at family dinners. "Oh, you must be so busy, laundry, dishes, and what else?" She'd show off pictures of her friends' daughters who were surgeons, lawyers, and executive managers, emphasizing that they never let their potential go to waste. And though it hurt, I also recognized something in her tone that I hadn't seen before. A strange kind of envy, or perhaps fear, that her own life choices might somehow be overshadowed if I dared to find success in an unconventional way. Still, I remained polite. I respected her as David's mother, and I loved my husband too much to start a war that could put him in an uncomfortable position. Yet each time she whispered, "You poor thing, you'll never understand what real fulfillment is," my muscles tensed. I wanted to scream that I was more fulfilled than she could ever imagine. But I stayed quiet, only letting my frustration out in the solitude of my thoughts, or into the blossoming side project that was swiftly becoming something bigger. Patricia had no idea what seeds she was watering with her contempt. The final straw was one of those innocuous family afternoons at our place, not unlike the dinner we'd just had. Patricia and David's father came over for a casual lunch. I'd cooked a lovely meal, laid out the table with fresh flowers, and tried my best to be the perfect host. But the second Patricia walked in, she started. "It's nice you have a hobby," she said, glancing at my freshly baked pastries with a condescending nod. "But have you ever considered going back to work? Something real?" I was slicing bread when her words cut deeper than the knife in my hand. What made it worse was how easily she dismissed anything I did as purely domestic fluff. "It's a shame," she continued, sipping her water as though it were some fine vintage. "Such a bright girl, spending her days wiping noses and folding laundry." She laughed in that mirthless way that told me she wasn't joking. David, bless his heart, rubbed my back in silent solidarity, but I could feel him tense too. This wasn't just a one-time slight. It was a carefully crafted performance Patricia put on, like she enjoyed rattling me. I smiled politely, but inside, anger and resolve surged. Then she went in for the kill. "You're wasting your youth, dear," she said, picking up her fork like a royal scepter. "All that education, all that intelligence, gone to waste on house chores. By the time you realize you've thrown away your best years, it'll be too late." She flicked her gaze at David. "You should really encourage her to do something more productive, darling. She's too smart to be a stay-at-home mother." My face felt hot, and I forced myself not to fling the dinner plate across the room. Instead, I clenched my fists under the table and inhaled. Patricia had stepped over the line many times, but this time, her words felt more piercing, more personal. The storm inside me raged. I wanted to retort, to stand up and tell her how I had turned my so-called time-wasting into a goldmine. But one glance at my husband's pained expression told me that now was not the moment. I wasn't interested in a petty argument. No, I wanted something bigger, something that would permanently shift the balance of power. So I said nothing. I simply fed on her disrespect, letting it fuel the quiet empire I was building under her nose. My blog started as a way to chronicle the day-to-day joys and challenges of motherhood, an online journal to capture fleeting moments with my children. It wasn't glamorous, nor was it strategic in the beginning. I wrote about sleepless nights, diaper blowouts, the existential worry of whether I was doing enough. I shared simple recipes, budget tips, and anecdotes that made me laugh or cry. It was raw, honest, and very much me. At first, my audience was small: friends, family, a few other moms I met in parenting forums. But then something remarkable happened. My posts began to resonate. Mothers from around the world reached out, thanking me for putting into words what they felt but couldn't articulate. My inbox flooded with messages of solidarity, and my readership soared. It turned out that in a sea of Pinterest-perfect parenting blogs, my candid confessions were a breath of fresh air. Soon, advertisers noticed. They saw the passionate, engaged community forming around my words, and brand managers sent me emails asking if I would feature their products. Over time, I refined my strategy, learned about affiliate marketing, negotiated better contracts, and before I knew it, I was turning down deals that didn't align with my values. Slowly, the blog morphed from a personal hobby into a genuine business. I registered an LLC, hired a virtual assistant to manage my overflowing email, and started reading up on digital marketing. I discovered that social media could be my friend, and not just a source of endless scrolling. So, I built a professional Instagram account and posted consistent, relatable content. The engagement was sky high. Moms would comment by the dozens, sharing their own stories and advice. Brands noticed, and I began landing paid sponsorships that made my previous part-time office salary look like spare change. It didn't stop there. I began creating digital products. Simple ebooks filled with meal plans for busy parents, guides for postpartum self-care, and worksheets to help families organize their schedules. I priced them affordably, thinking I might sell a few copies a week. But as my audience grew into the hundreds of thousands, so did my sales. Each launch dwarfed the last, and my email list ballooned with eager subscribers. Meanwhile, Patricia still looked down on me as just a mom. Little did she know, I was pulling in more monthly revenue than her entire investment portfolio. And the best part was, I was doing it from home. Of course, David was fully aware of my financial success. He'd been there to see every milestone, From my first $50 affiliate check to the day I proudly told him we'd made our first 6 figures in a single year. At first, he was simply happy for me, delighted that I'd found something that brought me joy and fulfillment. But when the numbers started getting really big, when brand deals hit 5 figures, when my product launches started selling out in hours, he was both stunned and proud. He asked me once if I wanted to share my achievements with his mother to see if it might change her perspective. But at the time, I waved away the suggestion. Patricia's approval wasn't what I was working for. My content was for real moms and women who found validation, hope, and practical help in my words. That was my reason for continuing, not the chance to silence a snobby mother-in-law. Still, a tiny part of me fantasized about the day she might find out, because I knew she valued power and money above all else, and I had quietly amassed both. David understood that proving myself to her wasn't the point, but it might feel good all the same. We discussed revealing the truth, imagining how Patricia's face would contort if she knew that I was responsible for a thriving enterprise. Yet each time we toyed with the idea, we dismissed it. I had no desire to engage in a bragging contest. Plus, Patricia's scorn fueled me in a strange way. Every snide remark gave me another reason to pour my energy into the blog. It became a mission to empower other women who felt belittled for choosing motherhood as a priority, whether they worked outside the home or not. My community of readers loved the authenticity and unity I fostered. We had private Facebook groups, weekly Zoom check-ins, even local meetups. Each new event or product launched to thunderous applause. The revenues soared, and the intangible rewards, friendships, gratitude, personal growth, were priceless. Sometimes I'd scroll through the comments and tear up, reading how someone felt less alone because of something I'd shared. That kind of success went beyond money. It touched the heart. Still, the financial success kept climbing, and with every new venture, I couldn't help but think, if Patricia knew, would she dare say I was wasting my life? The answer thrilled me. She'd be forced to swallow her bitter words. In a quiet moment after one of Patricia's visits, David and I finally had a frank discussion about our future. We both admitted that living under her disapproving gaze was draining. We deserved a home that truly reflected our achievements and our growth, someplace bigger, better, and more comfortable for us and our children. We weighed our options. David had a respectable income, but truthfully, our dream home was now well within my reach. That fact still made me laugh sometimes, remembering how uncertain I'd been when I first started blogging. Before we pulled the trigger on anything, I ran the numbers. Our savings, projected earnings, and the property market. It was beyond feasible. It was downright easy to afford a luxury home without straining. It felt surreal, but also completely earned. I'd worked tirelessly, sacrificing sleep to write posts at 2 a.m. when the kids were finally down. I'd learned the intricacies of digital marketing, branding, and product creation, all while Patricia thought I was just lounging around. We decided then and there that we'd make the move. But the question lingered, should we tell Patricia it was my money funding it all? Or let her keep believing what she wanted? Ultimately, we agreed that there was no need to announce it outright. David handled most of the phone calls and negotiations, and I quietly wrote checks, all while continuing my daily routine of school drop-offs and blog updates. When we found the perfect property, a stunning estate with a wide backyard for the kids, a sunlit kitchen, and enough guest rooms for extended family visits, we put in an offer. It was accepted immediately. We kept it hush-hush. Not out of shame, but because a part of me wanted Patricia to see the new house with her own eyes before she could rattle off her usual dismissive remarks. We invited her over for a housewarming weekend, careful not to reveal too many details. She showed up in her typical designer attire, nose slightly wrinkled, as though expecting a mere upgrade from modest to moderate. From the outside, the estate was impressive but discreet. Patricia gave polite nods, barely masking her disappointment that we hadn't picked a house in one of those exclusive name-droppable neighborhoods. She assumed that if David was paying, we must have gone the economical route. Little did she know, that assumption was about to be shattered beyond repair. The interior was another story. Every room exuded elegance and luxury, from the vaulted ceilings to the modern decor. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased acres of lush land. A swimming pool glittered in the sunlight, and a private office in the west wing boasted custom cabinetry. Patricia's eyes widened with each step, her stiletto heels tapping across marble floors. She said nothing at first, just took it in, as if trying to process the possibility that we could afford such grandeur. Her curiosity seemed piqued. "So?" she finally ventured, turning toward David. "This is quite the buff upgrade. Are you sure about the mortgage payments?" Her voice carried a thinly veiled implication. Her precious son might be in over his head. David and I exchanged a knowing glance. We'd gone over every detail with our real estate agent and financial advisor. The mortgage, while considerable, was a non-issue given my monthly income streams. Yet still, I held my tongue. Let her draw her own conclusions for the moment, I thought. She walked around the living room, eyeing the high-end furniture and original artwork. "This must have set you back a fortune," she said, eyebrows raised, waiting for David to confess some form of financial folly. Patricia's skepticism turned to thinly cloaked glee when she assumed the entire financial burden rested on David's shoulders. She likely imagined him drowning in debt just to impress me. The corners of her lips curved upward in a sort of sanctimonious pity. She leaned in, tapping David's arm as if sharing a secret. "Now, dear, I know you've got a good job, but these places can be money pits. Has your wife at least started looking for employment to help out?" Even then, David remained cool. "Mom, we've got it under control," he said, refusing to take her bait. She shook her head, that condescending tone creeping back. "Well, just don't be foolish. I'd hate to see you both regretting such a massive investment." I bit down on the inside of my cheek, half amused, half annoyed. She was so convinced we were overreaching that I was still doing nothing, that David was the sole provider. No matter how many times we assured her, she'd never believe me unless I spelled it out. And at that point, I was more than ready to let the final reveal speak for itself. Let her pick apart our decisions all she wanted. My upcoming words would be the real showstopper. We'd decided, just moments before her arrival, that David would be the one to drop the big bomb. After all, Patricia was his mother, and it felt fitting that he should be the one to finally give her a reality check. But I had my part to play, too. A calm, collected stance, ready to drive home the truth without rubbing it in. We led Patricia into the spacious dining area, where sunlight streamed in through large windows, making the mahogany table gleam. She stared at the high-end appliances in the kitchen, each more advanced than the next. "Goodness," she huffed, attempting a casual laugh. "I never thought my son would have a house like this. Must be a big chunk out of your savings. Are you sure about your finances?" She circled back to that line of questioning, clearly trying to glean a confession that we were in over our heads. David exchanged a quick glance with me. This was the moment. "Actually, Mom," he said, his voice steady and measured, "there's something you should know about this purchase. The house was bought primarily with my wife's earnings. She's been the major breadwinner for a while now." Patricia froze, her face a canvas of shock. The stage was set. Patricia's jaw dropped so abruptly that for a second, I thought she might spill her drink. She blinked, looking from David to me as if we were playing a cruel prank. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice quivering with equal parts confusion and disbelief. "She doesn't have a job." Her words trailed off weakly. Her unwavering certainty that I contributed nothing was colliding with the stark reality that I'd financed a luxury estate. David cleared his throat. "Mom, she does have a job. Actually, she owns a very successful business, one that generates enough revenue to more than cover the mortgage on this place." Patricia's mouth clamped shut as she tried to formulate a response. Her eyes darted around, likely recalculating every snide remark she'd ever made. I could feel her scrambling to find a reason to dismiss my achievements, but the evidence was surrounding her, shining in every polished fixture and piece of upscale decor. Stepping forward, I joined David, gently placing my hand on his arm. "Mom," I said, making sure to use the same familial address she always insisted on, "I run a parenting blog, an online platform, that's grown into a multi-million-dollar business. This is our home, because of that success." You could have heard a pin drop. Patricia's lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at David, then back at me, struggling to connect the dots. A blog? She finally managed, her voice wavering with reluctant acknowledgement. I nodded, giving her a brief summary. How it started as a journal, how I built a community of mothers worldwide, how brand deals and product lines turned my once small venture into a revenue powerhouse. She swallowed, visibly unsettled by the revelation. For years she had been ridiculing me, and now it turned out I was the one quietly shouldering a massive portion of our financial growth. In that moment, I thought I saw a flicker of embarrassment in her eyes. She seemed both fascinated and horrified. But you never said anything, she murmured, almost accusingly. I gave a gentle shrug. You never asked, I said. Or rather, you never believed I could be doing anything meaningful at home. Patricia's cheeks darkened, and I could sense the gears turning in her mind. She wanted to find a flaw, an angle to diminish my accomplishment. But there was no wiggle room here. This estate was tangible proof, a glorious testament to the power of my so-called wasted potential. Her reaction was almost comical in its range: shock, envy, confusion, and something edging dangerously close to grudging respect. Patricia finally set her glass down on a nearby countertop, realizing she had been absent-mindedly clutching it this entire time. She inhaled sharply, eyes darting around as though the house itself might offer an escape from the reality settling in. I see, she said in a low voice, struggling to maintain her composure. David moved closer to me, and together we stood firm. This was the moment we'd both anticipated for so long. All of Patricia's scathing remarks, the belittling, the endless criticism, it all led here, to a confrontation with the truth she could no longer ignore. Actually, Mom, David added gently, this has been a long time coming. She didn't need to get a real job because she already had one. She just didn't feel like she had to prove herself to you. The tension in the air was electric. I could practically see the power dynamics shifting in the room. Patricia now stood in our home, in awe of what we had achieved through my work, her earlier prejudice crumbling under the weight of undeniable success. I offered her a calm, measured smile. I'm sorry if you felt my life choices were a waste, but this is who I am. A mother, a wife, and a business owner. I've built something meaningful, something that helps thousands of other moms, and I'm proud of that. The words came out without anger, just a firmness that demanded respect. It was a long overdue statement of self-worth. Patricia opened her mouth, ready to retort, but then closed it again. She gave a curt nod, as if struggling to accept that she'd been entirely wrong. Finally, she spoke, her voice a little steadier. Well, I didn't realize things had gotten so big. Congratulations. It wasn't exactly a warm apology, but it was as close to contrition as I'd ever seen from her. The silence that followed was awkward, yet brimming with victory. I felt a sense of triumph that had nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with self-validation. All my internal battles, the nights spent doubting whether I was on the right path, the moments Patricia's words made me second-guess myself, none of it mattered anymore. The evidence of my accomplishments was shining in every room of this house, and there was no going back. In the days following that revealing moment, Patricia's interactions with me shifted. She was still imperious and proud by nature, but gone was the relentless mockery, the constant insinuation that I was beneath her. When we gathered for family events, she'd make polite conversation. On occasion, she would ask, "How's work going?" with genuine curiosity, although it was clear she didn't quite understand the digital landscape. I recognized that she was too proud to outright apologize. Admitting fault on such a grand scale would likely never be in her vocabulary. But I didn't need an apology anymore. The house, my blossoming career, and the respect my husband and children showed me were enough. Patricia could swallow her pride or not. Either way, I'd proven myself without having to utter a single defensive word. Sometimes she'd linger near me at gatherings, trying to glean more insights about my blog. She would ask, "Do you manage everything alone? Or isn't it exhausting handling kids and a business?" The tone was more inquisitive than accusatory now. Perhaps she was piecing together the idea that motherhood and ambition aren't mutually exclusive. Our dynamic found a new, uneasy balance. She no longer mocked me, and I no longer craved her validation. The first time Patricia visited us in our new home after that big reveal, her demeanor was markedly different. She still carried herself with the same authoritative air, but she also made a point to acknowledge what I'd achieved. She eyed the framed magazine cover on my office wall, my photo, accompanied by a headline about successful women entrepreneurs. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something like admiration. She reached out to lightly tap the glass. "You were featured in a magazine," she said, barely hiding her astonishment. I nodded, casually explaining it was one of several publications that had profiled my journey from a personal blog to a thriving enterprise. Patricia pressed her lips together, then cleared her throat. "Well, I suppose that's quite an accomplishment," she mumbled, eyeing the cover with mixed emotions. As awkward as it was, I appreciated the shift in tone. No barbs, no thinly veiled insults, just a subdued acknowledgement that my efforts had borne fruit. Over time, she stopped raising the topic of me getting a real job. She asked about my marketing strategies instead, or which brands I was collaborating with next. Though she might never say it aloud, her actions spoke volumes. Respect had finally replaced scorn. This newfound détente didn't erase our complicated history. Patricia was who she was, formidable, sharp-tongued, and unyielding. But she now recognized that I was just as formidable in my own right. Her snide remarks about lounging around were replaced with measured questions about my workload. I even heard her boasting to a neighbor on the phone one afternoon. "My daughter-in-law runs an online platform that reaches millions. It's really quite successful." Hearing her say it, even when she thought I wasn't listening, sent a jolt of satisfaction through me. Not because I craved her praise, but because it confirmed that she could no longer dismiss me as a trivial housewife. Our children, now older, also noticed the difference in how Grandma treated me. Less condescension, more civility. I took pride in showing them that standing up for oneself can be done with grace, and that success can speak louder than any confrontation. David was relieved. The tension at family gatherings eased significantly. He no longer had to worry about me enduring passive-aggressive barbs, nor did he feel torn between defending me and placating his mother. The revelation of my success had brought a strange sort of peace to the family dynamic. In the quiet aftermath of Patricia's capitulation, I realized something important. I never truly needed her approval to begin with. Validation had come from my own sense of purpose, from the countless mothers who found solace and guidance in my blog, and from my children, who benefited from my flexible schedule and the love I poured into every aspect of their upbringing. Yet I wouldn't deny that seeing Patricia forced to acknowledge my achievements offered a certain satisfaction. At times, I felt almost sorry for her. She had defined success so narrowly, by corporate titles, corner offices, and public accolades, that she couldn't comprehend a different path, much less one that could eclipse her own expectations. By the time she realized how large my venture had become, the journey was already complete. I'd proven that motherhood and ambition are not mutually exclusive, that one can raise children and build an empire. Her respect, albeit grudging, was a byproduct of that success. But for me, the real reward was all the women who wrote to say I'd inspired them, or saved them, or simply made them feel less alone. That was worth more than any nod of approval from my mother-in-law. Life settled into a new normal. My blog continued to flourish, expanding into podcasting and virtual events. Patricia became something of a backhanded supporter. She never apologized outright, but she also never tried to belittle me again. Her friends, the same high-powered circles she once flaunted, started asking her questions about my online empire. She'd beam with reserved pride, explaining that her daughter-in-law was a savvy entrepreneur. Ironically, the very group she once held as the pinnacle of success began to admire me for forging my own unique path. Through it all, I felt a profound sense of closure. The silent war I'd waged against Patricia's assumptions had ended, not with shouted words or humiliations, but with undeniable facts and figures. Over time, I discovered that the best way to handle doubters is simply to keep doing what you do best. Eventually, they either come around or fade into irrelevance. Yes, Patricia had been an obstacle, but she'd also pushed me, albeit unintentionally, to channel my frustration into something constructive and powerful. I reflected often on how many stay-at-home moms or any woman with a dream face this kind of skepticism. My story had become a beacon, a reminder that quiet determination can reshape the narrative. In the end, I realized it was never about proving Patricia wrong. It was about proving myself right. The house, the business, and the respect I finally commanded were mere milestones on a journey that started with a simple desire: to be present for my children while finding a sense of personal fulfillment. People will always underestimate you, especially when your path doesn't look like theirs. But the moment your accomplishments light up the sky for all to see, naysayers are left with no choice but to acknowledge your worth. The best way to prove someone wrong isn't through heated arguments or long-winded explanations. It's through undeniable success. While Patricia may never say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong," her softer tone and cautious respect tell me all I need to know. As I sit in my home office, looking out over the rolling green lawn, I'm filled with gratitude for the life I've built and the lessons I've learned. I've discovered that staying true to your calling, nurturing your passions, and balancing them with family can yield rewards that go far beyond monetary gain. And in those quiet moments, coffee in hand, I remind myself, sometimes winning is as simple as living your best life on your own terms.